and doing a lot of community input around 2 years ago on a proposal to do select bus service in the Rockaways. And initially, when the first proposal was released, we were sort of very unhappy with it because we did not feel that it was an inclusive plan. Uh, Let me remind people that majority of the population of the Rockaways is on the eastern end, and the population is growing. Obviously, there's a lot of new development happening. To look at what's going on across the street. Eventually, there'll be conversations about more growth there. So, the Rockaways is a place that historically has been considered a transportation desert. Uh, the A Train, if you don't believe me, the Strap Hangers campaign just released a report last week at the beginning of the new year that rated the A Train in the top three worst trains in the city, one of the worst three in the city. The Q22 is unreliable. The Q52 is unreliable. The Q114 has got much better because we introduced limited stops on it for those going to Jamaica. So with select bus service, we have an opportunity to ensure that transit equity in the Rockaways is at the forefront of all conversations. And I'm a firm believer that as we have more growth in the Rockaways, transportation has to improve. Just recently, we announced the ferry is coming back, obviously, and we want to thank the Blvd administration for their work on this. They initially have released a proposal that a satellite bus would run to 67th Street, and we fought hard and won that battle. And I'm happy to announce today that the ferry satellite bus will now run all the way to 35th Street, making a stop at 54th Street over here, making a stop at 67th Street. So that's going to enable us to really move people to different modes of transportation. And why is that important? Because you want to lessen the impact and overcrowding on the A train. You want to give people so many different modes of opportunities to get in and off the peninsula at any time. And then as tourism boost here in the Rockaways, we saw millions of people come here over the last few years. The beach is beautiful. The boardwalk is being rebuilt. We want to make sure that we are bringing people to all sides of the Rockaway to create economic development and community development opportunities, which means that it's a better time, it's an easier time to boost sales to our local stores. Commercial is something critical here that we need to improve on. But we can only do that with the population we have, but also in ensuring that everyone who comes to the Rockaways is not centered in just one place. So select bus service, I've talked about this as someone who lived in Arvin View, right up the block from here, my first year of college. The 52 was so unreliable, I had to go all the way to Roosevelt Avenue, which is along this bus route. I refuse to take the 52. Why? Because it's like nearly a 2-hour ride to get up to Roosevelt Avenue because it's just too slow. It's unreliable, heavily populated. Then let's just move into the post-Sandy conversation. After Sandy, remember the A train was not running. The 52 was what we relied on to get into Rockaway, and obviously we had to transfer to other buses to come further down. So that means the Q22 to come down, which meant a lot more overcrowded. And then let's remember the A train is still unreliable to this day. Once again, A train is considered one of the worst trains in the city of New York. And for anybody who rides it in the Rockaways, we know this is a reality every day for us. So the Q52 route gives us an opportunity to really expand opportunity here to ease overcrowding on the Q22 bus here, to ease overcrowding on the A train, but most importantly, to put time back into working families' hands. Every minute you're not home with your family, that's a minute lost of family time. If you're a college student who needs to get home to study, every minute counts. So even if we chipped off, in which this proposal, I believe, can shave off nearly 15 to 20 minutes of travel for residents on the Eastern and in the Rockaways altogether, it's an opportunity to make sure that people have more time to do other things in the Rockaways to enjoy time with their family, to study a little bit more, to spend time with their children, and also to just get to commercial opportunities. As we know, it's very hard to get from east to west here on this peninsula. So on Tuesday, the Department of Transportation is presenting a proposal at Community Board 14, in which they're going to speak about this proposal, and there will be a vote. And I'm calling on the Department of Transportation to ensure that in whatever proposal, whatever final proposal that comes out, that we want to see an expansion to the eastern end of the Rockaways. We want it to come as far east as possible to ensure that there's more transit equity along this peninsula. Once again, this is about putting time back into working families' hands. 40% of Rockaway residents on the eastern end live below the poverty line, which means that they do not have access to cars. So they really need to be able to have several different modes of transportation that, most importantly, are reliable. It's good to have a bus, but if the bus is not reliable, what good is having the bus? So we want to ensure that everyone has opportunity to have transit equity on this peninsula. And this is why I'm supporting the Woodhaven plan, SBS plan, but we still want to see more in it that's going to reflect the entire peninsula.
Some of the residents in Woodhaven and Ozone Park have been, pretty vocally against the plan. Do you have a message for them, what you think that SBS would mean for Woodhaven Boulevard? I mean, can you address
Well, Woodhaven is historically a very unsafe intersection. I mean, for one, we need to slow cars up there. On any day, if the A train does not run, that's where you find hundreds of Rockaway residents fighting to get on one train, one bus. I mean, it's unbelievable. You can have 200 to 300 people outside waiting for a bus, fighting to get home. And let's remember, 30,000 people use this Woodhaven route every day to come into the Rockaways. 30,000 people. This is a major artery for the peninsula, and not just for peninsula residents, people who live in Broad Channel, all the way down into Far Rockaway. This is a major artery for us. So most importantly, we need to improve the safety of Woodhaven, and this is one way of doing it. So I've heard the opposition, and I think this is normal. We heard it when they did it on Nostrand Avenue in Brooklyn. People were really opposed, but it actually turned out to be a good thing for anybody who's seen it. I've certainly driven by. It's not as bad as people thought it was going to be. And secondly, the most important thing is to ensure that we're getting people out of their cars, right? This area was devastated by Hurricane Sandy. The more people that use cars means more CO is out into the environment, which means more sea level rise, which means more flooding for communities across the Rockaway Peninsula. So it's very important to remember, just in the holistic look at climate change, we have to get people out of their cars, but the only way to do that is to ensure that there is reliable transportation. Otherwise, people are not going to ditch their cars. The Department of Transportation also recently announced that they're going to be doing, and we heard some legislation 2 weeks ago in the City Council, or 3 weeks ago, speaking of a car share proposal pilot across the city. And the Rockaway Peninsula should be one area that pilot is considered. Why? Because once again, many people cannot afford cars who are living below the poverty line. We have public housing, we have seniors, and that's another way to create different opportunities and modes of transportation for residents here. So the message for Woodhaven residents is, listen, transit equity is good for everybody. That means we could come down to Woodhaven and use your shops a little bit more, right? I mean, even though I want people to shop here, but we have more opportunity to spread our wealth when we have more transportation alternatives.
And then specifically, how far do you want it to go down? And do you think that the road infrastructure here could handle the additional?
Well, right now, the Department of Transportation is finishing up a $2 million study on the eastern end. It's called the Access to Eastern End Transportation study. So we anticipate that study to be finished up, God willing, latest the fall. And we are looking at making several transportation upgrades, whether it's signaling, whether it's the signals, traffic signals, infrastructure. So there's going to be short-term investment and long-term investment. Right now in Edgemere, we're planning, we have a major planning study going on with the Housing Preservation and Development Corporation of the City of New York. So we're looking at infrastructure big time here. There's going to be a lot of growth in this area over the next few decades. But we expect some immediate short-term improvements coming by the fall, and we'll be making that announcement. All righty. Any questions? Gail, question? Question? Vera? Oh.
No, honestly, just one more time. Why? I know you're saying that you want, select bus service expand. It's good where what we're getting, but we need more kind of thing.
Okay.
It's why that's...
Yeah, so right now, select bus service stops at 67th Street in Auburn. And for this area, this is the densest part of the Rockaway. Thousands of people, 1,400 units right in public housing here. This is the densest part. You can't stop just at 67th Street. We need to make sure we're pulling in more alternatives of transportation further east. So this is important because this is a question of transit equity. Public housing residents, working families, middle-class homeowners, they also deserve, not to say 67th Street doesn't have that, but we need to make sure that we include the densest part of the Rockaways in this conversation. And right now, they're not in the conversation. Right now, they're just saying we're going to do select bus service. It's going to stop at 67 in Auburn. That's not good enough. We need select bus service to further extend down Eastern. That's what you're looking for? Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for making the true. You drove?